Welcome to Global Science, everyone. From Singapore, Sharon Sung will share her insights on a revolutionary aspect of fintech which practically allows all investors to access alternative investment products typically available to only institutional investors. Sharon is the Chief Commercial Officer of Mintrest, a dynamic company which is focusing on financial inclusion and investor democracy. Sharon, welcome to Global Science.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be able to share about Mintrest.
Thank you very much. Can you tell our viewers about Mintrest and your role there?
So we are a digital investment platform that's focused on providing access to private capital markets and alternative investment to investors, regardless of background. Now, what do I mean by regardless of background? This is, typically private banks or wealth management platforms are accessible to high net worth individuals, family offices, or sophisticated investors based on wealth. But we are proponents that investments should be available to everyone based on knowledge and understanding, regardless of level of wealth. So my role as CCO at Mintrest means that I'm responsible for both the origination of new deals as well as the distribution of sales of these deals to investors. I see both ends of the equation in this case, and we need to have a sense of which borrowers have a good business model, good promoters or management, and be able to provide them with loans to help their business grow. For the real estate deals, it's about spotting unique investment opportunities which are not typically available. These include direct loans secured against a single asset with scarcity value. So for example, a conserved shophouse in Singapore, an office building in Seoul, to residential condos in Melbourne or the Gold Coast. And on the investor side, we are promoting bite-sized investment to democratize access to institutional-grade investment. This is increasingly appealing to investors who want to be educated to make better investment decisions.
What are alternative investments and why are they important for an investor?
Alternative investment are typically instruments that are not regarded as traditional, which are listed shares, equities, corporate bonds, fixed income securities. While the universe of alternative spans private debt, real estate, venture funds, private equity, and hedge funds. So alternative investments are essential in an investment portfolio because they help to diversify the risk while achieving higher returns on a risk-adjusted basis. Historically, real estate showed low correlation to equity markets and interest rates. However, if you consider all the various investment alternatives from the range I mentioned earlier, which is the private debt, venture funds, and real estate, between these asset classes, the correlation is very low and therefore essential for diversification of risk in your portfolio.
In Korea, there are very few individual investors who invest in alternative investments. Excluding Korea, do individual investors globally invest in alternative investments? If not, what are the reasons that kept them from doing so?
I'd like to take a step back on this question. I would first address that the global market for alternatives is actually very large and growing. There are some $6 trillion worth of AUM, assets under management, in the alternative universe. So within Asia Pacific, the market is expected to double in 3 years and is leading the growth at a utilization rate of 61% in Asia, ahead of North America at 27% and Europe at 54%. The Asia Pac segment in particular, the private capital AUM totaled 1.7 trillion, up 2.8 times in 5 years. The private capital AUM growth in Asia is expected to achieve a CAGR of 28% between 2020 and 2025. The main reasons investors are not currently invested in alternatives is probably the access issue that we alluded to earlier. The average investment ticket size in the past ranged between 1 to 5 million per investor or per deal, and this is obviously prohibitive for the average investor. So today, that's exactly what we're trying to address and change.
Fascinating. Now, how can an investor incorporate alternative investments into her portfolio? Are they riskier?
Today, there are multiple avenues open and available with the rise of technology and the ability to reduce transaction costs, such as digital investment platforms like Mintrest. So there are now actually many ways that investor can access bite-sized alternative investments. And the returns technically should commensurate with the risk profile, but it is important that an investor tries to understand the risks that investment carries. But this is true, for both traditional and alternative investments.
What is your real estate outlook for both Asia and globally?
Well, I actually think there is still strong demand for housing generally, especially with the rising middle class in Asia. This is obviously most pronounced in China and specifically in the larger economies like Indonesia and Vietnam. And I think we have seen the rise of not only housing prices, but also the fundamental demand at the middle class level. Office demand is also not suffering as badly as one might think, given the COVID situation. Companies are actually rethinking their space requirements, and in most cases, in fact, increasing their needs due to distancing and more meeting room and for video calls that are required now. And finally, I would say that retail and hospitality with the COVID eventually becoming endemic and governments and societies learning to deal with it as such, they probably recover in 12 to 18 months.
Now, Sharon, finally, can you recommend any promising sectors to our viewers today?
Well, Bruce, I'm still a strong believer in healthcare, technology, and logistics as a general sector. I think these were already in focus during COVID, but I still believe they will continue to grow. And as I stated earlier, I do think entertainment and retail will make a comeback in the next 12 to 18 months.
Sharon Sung, Dynamic Chief Commercial Officer of Mintrest, based in Singapore. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your insight on this fascinating democratic financial product.
Thank you, Bruce. It was a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you very much. That does it for us this week. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next week, please be safe and healthy.